Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica Espino. I'm from the Northwest region, and I am the June Area Survey Lead for our region. In this presentation, I will go over the Heart of June area, Section D. Why is Section D the Heart of June area, you may ask? Well, because this is a section that makes the June area survey different from all other NASS surveys, as we are surveying the land for missing farms. This section also helps determine how incomplete our list sampling frame is for crop acreage. And it is used to derive the objective yield survey sample. So what is Section D for? Section D is designed to be a recording form for the tract acreage within the area land segments. It accounts for all the acres inside the blue tract boundaries as shown on this example segment. We then use the tract acreage to set estimates of crops and land usage for the upcoming June acreage report. And for that reason, it is important to take a little extra time to review the parcel maps with tract operators while you have them on the phone. This is to ensure that you have this section completed correctly. Starting with this first question in Section D and the rest of the tract questionnaire, you will record acres to the nearest tenth of an acre, or 1 decimal point. Most importantly, to note for this section is to not include any land from outside the red segment boundaries. We are only collecting data for the land inside the red segment boundaries. The rest of the tract questionnaire will account for total acres operated by the tract operator, and that will be discussed at a later time. I encourage you to double check the tract acres in this section before you conclude your phone interview with the tract operator. We no longer need to obtain field level data, which simplifies this section tremendously for all involved. We still need to know what's inside the red segment boundaries, but we only need to obtain data at the tract level. Okay, let's dive into the different parts of this section. Lines 2 to 5 remain the same for all state tract questionnaire versions. However, there are key points to keep in mind for these 5 lines, such as on line 2, not all tracts will have a farmstead within the segment boundaries, and that is okay. On line 3, waste includes windbreaks, roads, swamps, vacant homes, water areas, and all other waste types. Line 4 accounts for woodland pastured and not pastured. If you come across an operator that has woodland that is grazed or woodland with limited grazing potential, then this needs to be listed as woodland pastured. All other woodland should be listed as not pastured, such as CRP land planted in trees, abandoned fruit or nut orchards, and acres harvested for lumber or pulpwood. Also keep in mind that woodland pasture or not pasture cannot be combined with pasture acres on line 5. Regardless of acreage size, these are independent of each other. And then line 5 accounts for the pasture. And this is permanent pasture, which is ground that is normally grazed by livestock and is not in regular crop rotation. This is typically ground that has not been tilled. Then there is cropland pasture, which is cropland in crop pasture rotation that is used only for pasture during the current year, but could be and has been used for crops without additional land improvements. As mentioned before, you cannot have pastured woodland recorded with this line. And lastly, note that the dashed line on line 5 is basically a cropland divider. Everything below the dashed line is considered cropland, and everything above is not cropland. Line numbers will vary by the state questionnaire version you are working on. Next, we have lines 6 and 7. What are you recording here? You are accounting for tracts with acres in summer fallow and idle cropland. Summer fallow includes land in crop rotation that is tilled or treated with chemicals to control vegetation growth during the growing season, but it's not planted. Idle cropland is land that is not used for crops during the current year. CRP land is recorded here. The exception is CRP planted specifically to trees. This CRP is recorded in line 4, woodland not pasture, as I mentioned previously. Now let's take a look at the grain questions. Please note that line numbers and grain crops will vary by the state questionnaire version you are working on. And you will notice a pattern in the grain questions, which is acreage planted and to be planted for all purposes, acreage left to be planted, acreage harvested specifically for grain or seed, and other uses of the grain. Some examples of other grain uses would be corn for silage, or wheat that was planted and then abandoned. There are 2 additional points to consider for this portion of Section D. The first is that if small grains are reported, you will need to record acres planted last fall or this spring, even if the crop was abandoned prior to harvest. The second is if any of the reported grain acres are to be harvested for hay, then record this acreage under small grain hay line. The line number for small grain hay will be different for each state questionnaire version. Now let's move on to the non-grain crops. Here again, line numbers will vary by the state questionnaire version you are working on. The non-grain crop portion of Section D
includes crops such as soybeans, potatoes,
dry beans, dried peas, hay, and others. The main key points for this portion of Section D include
there is an additional line for double cropped acres of soybeans. This will appear on the 3rd line next to soybeans.
For hay, acres with more than 1 cutting, the acres are only reported once. And hay that is chopped for silage should be recorded in other crops. Here is a table to list any additional crops that are not already accounted for in this section. Please be specific as to what the other crop or crops are in this table. You have up to 5 lines to list other crops. If you have more specified than the 5 lines available, then go ahead and list those under this table. But make sure that the total other crop acres are accounted for in item code 848 box. Now it is time to review and add the acreage listed in this section and double check that it equals the total item code box 840. If it differs from the figure in the box, then check with the respondent for errors and correct as necessary. Ask yourself these questions. Did they include all waste acres? Did you or the respondent miss a crop? Or perhaps you misrecorded acres for a crop. The last 2 questions in Section D are cropland with irrigation potential.
Only select states will ask this irrigation question.
This includes all cropland acres with irrigation equipment, even if it was not used this year. And double cropped acres. This question reminds the farm operator to consider all uses of the tract this year. The acres we are after here are double cropped acres, which refer to 2 crops harvested from the same field during the same crop year. Lastly, we have the office use code 7793. This code was added to monitor the source of the data recorded in Section D. This year, this code will be completed by you, the enumerator, since tract questionnaires will be submitted via CAPI. So please make sure to include any notes on observation of the tract in CAPI. It is very important to understand that Section D needs to be completed regardless of the outcome of your interview with the tract operator.
Recording the correct crop and land use not only impacts crop estimates, it also affects objective yield sampling later on.
So use all the resources we provided you and your field observation notes to complete this section. If you need assistance in making a determination, then reach out to your supervisor, NASA coordinator, and/or the survey project lead for guidance. Okay, now it's time to look at a few examples of how to complete Section D. I will be using the Idaho State Questionnaire version for my example. Let's pretend that you have drawn off track boundaries for tracks A, B, C, and D on the segment. You completed Section D of the questionnaire for these tracks, and now it's time to review your work. But before you look at your work, it never hurts to look back on the basics as listed here. As you review your track assignments, consider these questions. Did I identify the correct track operator? Did I verify track boundaries with the operator? Did I draw off track boundaries in blue? Did I assign each tract a letter? Did I account for all land in the segment? Is each operating arrangement listed as a separate tract? All right, let's look at the example for tract A. Please keep in mind again that I am using the Idaho State Questionnaire version for these tract examples. Tract A operator told you that she has 60 acres in the segment boundaries. She has these acres divided in 30 acres of oat hay, 30 acres of corn silage. She also mentioned that all crop acres are irrigated. Note that the acres harvested for oat hay must be accounted for under line 23, small grain hay in this state questionnaire version. The small grain hay line will be different for your state. In addition, the corn is for silage, should be recorded under the other uses of corn planted on item code 789. And finally, you need to account for the 60 acres that the operator indicated that were irrigated. Next, we have the example for tract B. Tract B operator indicated that she initially planted 40 acres of spring wheat, all for grain. However, she ended up cutting 10 acres for silage that she used to feed her goats. And she indicated that these are all dryland acres. For tract C, the operator you spoke to indicated they have 28 acres total within the red boundaries of the segment. These 28 acres include 3 acres for their homestead, 14.5 acres of woodland that is not pastured, and 10.5 acres of permanent pasture for their horses. This tract is pretty straightforward and easy. In this final example, the operator in tract D told you that he has 30-acre orchard, of which 10 acres are apples, 10 acres are cherries, and 10 acres are hazelnuts, also known as filberts. These are all irrigated acres, which you accounted for in item code 803. You also made sure that the total acres listed in the other crops table are accounted for in item code 848 above the table, and that you specified what the crops were in the other table. As you may all know, what ifs are guaranteed, and it would be impossible to cover all of the what if scenarios that could occur for this section. However, if you come across a situation that you are not sure how to address, then you should consult your interviewer's manual and other survey resources provided to you by your regional office. Keep in communication with your supervisor and also reach out to NASA coordinators. And lastly, contact your regional office for further guidance. This concludes the review of Section D, the Heart of June Area. Thank you.